So to kick this afternoon off, we thought probably the most pertinent place is to look at you as an individual and your staff. So we're going to hand over to Phil Watson, and Phil is going to talk about the tiering system so that we've got a bit more clarity around what that involves, what it means for us, whether or not you should be returning to work and those considerations, and also some of the aspects around mental health support that sit behind whether people work from the office or whether they work from home. So I'm going to start this afternoon by handing over to Phil.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Thanks, team. Hello, viewers. So it's Phil from HR Unlimited. I guess regular viewers will know that already. I think the perspective I'm coming from is that many businesses still have employees on furlough, and or they may well be considering the new government support for returning employees part-time. So a week or so prior to the 1st of November, which is cut-off point, obviously, the furlough scheme, seemed like a good time to review what businesses should be doing. So I'd like to briefly dance through the three-tier restrictions, because I still find them a little bit confusing insofar as, we talk about tier 3 and then we talk about medium risk. Tier 1 is medium risk. Hang on, how does tier 1 medium risk? Surely it should be low risk. So it's all about semantics, but it can be confusing. And as an employer, you do have a duty of care to ensure that you are working within the government guidelines and keeping your employees safe. So there's a health and safety aspect regarding what you do at work. Then quickly visit whether or not you factors that you should be thinking about with respect to returning to work, returning to the office or not. And then looking at the mental health aspect, which has had so much airplay, it can only be good regarding people's awareness of mental health and the impact that certainly this situation is having on many, many people, not least business owners. Let's be perfectly frank about that. So if I can cram that into the next 12 minutes, I'll be doing very well indeed. So let's have a little look at the three-tier restrictions. I've got some guidance here. I did say I was a little confused about it. So we've got medium risk, which is tier 1. I'm happy to say that here in Lichfield, we are medium risk. And then we've got tier 2, which is high risk. And I know joining my clients in Birmingham and Sutton Coldfield are high risk. And then, of course, we've got 4-0 Liverpool, and we've got the Manx. So we've got the Scousers and the Manx, and anybody else that the government throws to the wolves, for a very good reason, I'm sure. We're going to be in tier 3, which is very high risk. And so all of those categories have got different restrictions from a workplace perspective. I'm going to bore everybody with the standard tier 1 stuff, because we all know that there's the rule of 6. Household mixing is permitted, but only within 6. As is indoor and outdoor mixing. And we've all got a 10 o'clock curfew. So I'm not going to explore that too much. But if you're in tier 2, so you are high risk, then there's no household mixing apart from support bubbles and new childcare bubbles. Why am I boring you with that? I'm boring you with that because you need to know what tier you're in. You need to know what tier your employees are in, so that you can give them appropriate guidance as to what they should and shouldn't be doing, so that you can keep the rest of their colleagues and yourself safe in the workplace. So you really do, as an employer, need to fully understand the differences between tier 1 and tier 2. A lot of us go to gym, yoga. Okay, a lot of our wives, in my case, go to gym, go to yoga classes, those kind of aerobic kind of stuff down at the gym. So really, if you've got employees who do that, you need to know that in tier 2, organised indoor exercise classes are only permitted if it's possible for those participants to avoid mixing. So really, conversations should be around how your employees are mixing. Now, you can't be too intrusive. Obviously, there are GDPR and freedom of speech issues in there. But really, you should be engaging people in conversations as to whether or not they're likely to be putting themselves at risk, and therefore you and their colleagues. Obviously, tier 2, the number of journeys made should be reduced, and walking and cycling should be used wherever possible. If that's not possible, and there is a public transport issue, maybe we should be thinking about working from home again. I think our audience is probably limited to the West Midlands. I'm not going to talk about the Manx, and I'm not going to talk about the Scousers. However, if Birmingham does go into Tier 3, very high risk, we need to be looking very, very closely as an employer at what the restrictions are in the workplace. It is not, let's be clear, it is not saying do not allow your employees to come to work. It is saying, the guidance is saying, you must manage that risk, and you must manage it to keep your business safe and to keep the individual safe within the government guidelines. If you look closely enough, it isn't complicated. However, it does change on an almost daily basis, as we know. So that's 3-tier restrictions. How about addressing quickly now whether or not we should be returning to the office or not? The guidance states, and has for some considerable time, that office workers should work from home if they can. But it also states that employers should ensure workplaces are safe for anyone who cannot work from home. So far, so good. I think most people, certainly most of my clients, have got COVID secure protocols in place and have all done risk assessments. But it also states, and the government guidance does say, that employers should consult with their employees on these matters. So just putting everything into place and telling your employees, right, start back in the office now, you're off furlough, need you back in the office Monday morning, bright and sharp, ready to rock and roll. I'm not going to do it. That's not consultation. So whether or not you feel that that's an added burden in terms of your time and communication as a business owner, you do need to be doing that because there will be weak points found out in the near future. I've no doubt of that. Should you be working from home? Should you allow your employees to work from home? Well, again, the guidance is quite specific. Where office workers can work effectively from home, then they should do so over the winter. And it also says where an employer, in consultation with their employee, judges that an employee can carry out their normal duties from home, then they should do so. So the onus is very much on work from home if you can. However, there's a caveat. There's always a caveat, isn't there? And that caveat is anyone who cannot work from home should go to their place of work. So how do you define can't work from home? Well, you define it in this way. You ask yourselves the questions, consult with your employees and say, from an organisational viewpoint, can the work in question be effectively done from home? So that's going to be, have you got the hardware infrastructure? Have you got the software infrastructure? Have people got a safe place in which to work where they can work effectively? As in, you know, you've not got lots of children running about and shouting. That'd be me then right now. You've got somewhere other than the kitchen table with lots of traffic coming past you all the time, so that you can focus on your work properly. Because if you can't focus on your work properly and you can't deliver that work, that will put a mental load on you and damage the effectiveness of you as an employee. So we've had 6 months of working from home, a lot of people at the moment. So we've got a much better appreciation of what works and what doesn't. But if as an employer, you are looking for a rationale to bring your employees back into the workplace and your employees are putting up some resistance, which in some instances is understandable. Many employees can't wait to get back to work because they're completely stir crazy. But they'll be angsty about the whole thing and stressed. Then ask yourself and your employees these questions. Do you need them to come back into work for training purposes, for supervision purposes, for regulatory compliance purposes? I'm not thinking of anyone in particular here at all, Prism, but operational efficiency, creativity and collaboration, bonding and relationship building. All of those things are questions that you really should be addressing and asking and discussing with your employees before they come back. Employee reasons for coming back include their own mental health and well-being, not least for those who live alone and perhaps have difficult home circumstances, cramped, noisy environments, etc. Poor Wi-Fi is very, very common. So all of those issues need to be addressed and recorded. Please, please, please record these conversations before you come to a mutual decision to bring the employee back to work or to keep them relatively safe in the home environment. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the mental health perspective. I did say when I first started this piece that overall employers should have regard to the duties of their employees, insofar as they must take reasonable care to avoid foreseeable psychiatric and psychological harm to their staff. You're not trained in psychology, are you? You're not. You just. It's really, really difficult as an employer. But I think we all know, we all have our own issues to deal with. We've all got friends and family who may well have had or have mental health issues. So you must have an awareness of the danger signs, and you need to just assess whether or not the individuals running your business will be better off at home, or whether or not they'll be better off in the workplace. And take that, put that into the mixing pot along with your decision. In terms of managing your employees' concerns, and there has been a lot of pushback from the employees of my clients regarding, certainly for the ones that are comfortable working from home and feel that it's a good use of their time. Issues that you need to discuss, particularly around mental health and returning to the office. Make sure that mental health is part of your risk assessments. If you haven't already done risk assessments, you've been very, very lucky to get this far without having a serious problem. And you won't get much further in the next 6 months. There'll be a problem. And the first thing that anyone who investigates that will need to see is your COVID security risk assessments. So consider mental health as part of those risk assessments. Make sure the steps are put in place as whatever you discover on those risk assessments, and make sure they're appropriate for following business considerations. Be absolutely clear about who's returning and when and why. If you've still got some people who are working from home, there may well be pushback around the, well, hang on a minute, Billy does it, why can't I do it? We do a job that's not dissimilar. And you're going to need to address and explain that and make sure that you have a full rationale for that. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You must communicate with your employees. It's vitally important, not just for their mental health, but obviously to make sure that the changing situation that we're living in is fully understood and that the employee understands the employer's perspective and vice versa. You can't do that without regular communication. Zoom meetings, team meetings have got many benefits, but it's not the same as a face-to-face meeting. So do that if you possibly can. So much emotional intelligence is buried deep in our face-to-face contact. You don't realise until you're missing it what face-to-face means. Hold return to work meetings. Make sure that you've assessed people's concerns, what they feelings, how they feel about coming back to work, what their expectations are in terms of COVID security and the protocols that you put in place, one-way passing places, one-way stairs, timings, rotas, all of the above. Cultivate your culture. I've nearly come to the end, guys, because 15 minutes is up, I think. Cultivate your culture. For many, many businesses, particularly small to medium-sized businesses, culture is vital. It's vital to them and it's vital to their employees that they're not just faceless work units. There are interactions that happen in the workplace that have not been able to happen when you're working from home very easily. So make sure that people understand what you expect of them, reinforce the culture, support and help them through just reintegrating with that culture. And finally, they need to know who they can go to talk to about mental health issues. There is still a massive stigma around mental health. We all use it. I still use it if I'm a little bit careless. My children often tell me off when I refer to nut jobs. Guess what? When I was 10, that was appropriate. Now it isn't appropriate and it's unfair, and we have a much broader understanding of mental health issues. But you need to make sure and communicate to your employees that there is a safe space that they can go to and talk about their concerns somebody who won't mock them, somebody who won't take the rise, somebody who won't share that information in the wider workplace. It might be class 101 for a lot of you, but actually if you haven't addressed that, you haven't built it into your risk assessment and your decision-making process about whether or not to work from home, whether or not to come back to the workplace, then ultimately you're flying on a wing and a prayer, and that would not be my best advice. Goodbye for the moment. That's Phil from HR Unlimited. I hope that some of you are still awake out there. I can see the panel are. Well done. Or perhaps they put their screens on freeze. Not really sure. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the team.
Thank you very much, Phil. Always very wise advice and very pertinent for where we are in this current world of everything being in flux. And, you know, communication is absolutely vital right now. And it's very hard when you've got some of your staff working from home, some of your staff working from the office, perhaps. Yes, people are going to be coming back off furlough. How are you going to reintegrate them with the business? What is the state of their mental health? They are all such important topics from a business perspective and a personal perspective that we really, really need to consider. We have had a question come in that is for Phil. So the question is, how do you get over the boss who is unreasonable and the employees will be reluctant to share with them?
It's a good question. And there are, you've got me mid-sandwich, sorry. And there are some unreasonable bosses out there. I know a couple of them are my clients, but it's all a matter of perspective. There's an awful lot of information out there. I mean, most employees will not be phoning me because clearly there'll be a charge attack. But I will always talk to people if they want to contact me. We can have a brief conversation. I can point them to areas where they can find out exactly what their rights are. It's unlikely that an unreasonable employer will stand strong in the face of the fact that actually, do you know what, I'm afraid I've checked and that's not within ACAS guidelines, that's not within your remit, that's not what my contract of employment says. You have to be, you know, quite staunch about that as an employee. But most employers will say, right, okay, I was unaware of that. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Okay, let's have a conversation. That's the only way really forward with those kind of challenges. Both sides really need to come to a consensus, and the employee needs to understand that sometimes the employer doesn't have an option, and the employee has two options: either go with it or go, or they can come to an agreement and a compromise.
Yeah,
ACAS website is very useful. It's very user friendly. There are many other websites out there. Not all of them are relevant to UK law, but yeah, the ACAS website would be a good starting place. Find out what your rights actually are, or call me at HR Unlimited.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thanks for answering that question. And another question that came through was about being able to demonstrate rather than just talk around the benefits of Teams. And we've over the series of recordings for last resort support, we have done several demonstrations of its use and its benefits. So when we have the videos available for this session, we will put in all the links to those demonstrations that we've done so that it does bring that to life, hopefully, to show people how they could benefit from using Teams, not just saying that they will do. So thank you for that.